Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you bearing with us. We're a couple minutes late here just because, it's a heat wave here in British Columbia where we both are. I think it's going to hit 44 degrees Celsius, and for everyone in the United States, that's 111 degrees Fahrenheit. Very hot, but I'm so happy to bring you one of my great friends over many years and the CEO of Aristotle Performance to talk about psychological safety. I know a lot of you may not know what that topic is, and we're going to start from the top there. But so let me introduce Neil Preddy. Great to have you on here, my friend.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate the welcome and interesting topic today: the connection between psych safety and artificial intelligence and how teams work. That's the world I live in every day. So this is a great. Happy to be talking about it here.
Yeah, and it's going to be so much fun, man. And I just want to say you got the best mustache in the world, and there's official competitions for that.
Well, I'll say, I've really made it when I shave it off, right? Then nobody will know who I am.
Right. And then they'll be like, where did Neil go? Where in the world? So let's walk through what is psychological safety and where did it come from originally? Because a lot of people on here might be a layman to the topic.
Yeah, so psychological safety is a belief that you can speak up without fearing getting fired or being humiliated or things like that. So where it comes from, it's not like a new idea. What it is an assessment of our environment that we make constantly from the age of about 3 years old. Okay, so once we start working with other people, we're assessing our environment to see how we should behave so that we can work well with others. It is quite literally the way that we figure out how to be in a group. So why that's important for teams is because if you create an environment where people can't speak up, then you don't hear what's happening out in the field. You don't hear what people are struggling with. You don't hear new ideas. People choose to not speak up. One thing I like to say is our default is silence. So you have to create an environment where people feel an obligation to speak up and comfortable enough to do that. So it's not some woo-woo new thing that just came out of the woodwork. This is part of our, how we come together as groups, as human beings. It's the most common universal experience we have. Everyone has an experience of going, should I say this or should I not say this? Mm-hmm. And when it's in a work environment, we're much more careful with that because work provides us with the resources, money, to live the way we want to live. So we are motivated, highly motivated, to do the right thing in those environments to keep our lives secure. So psychological safety is an environmental thing. And that's why one of the ways that we work with it is by, exploring what's happening through dialogue. We can measure it, we can do it. And leaders certainly have huge influence over it. There's all these things that influence it, but that's something we're doing all the time. Like if we're around other people, we're engaged in it.
Awesome. So this leads to a big question. What prompted you to dive in with your life's passion for you and Jason and to start Aristotle Performance together? What was that? What's that mission vision that you guys have for this industry?
Yeah, so there's kind of a couple of answers to that. One is a core belief in the Aristotle saying, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Mm-hmm. Another one was Google's research called Aristotle, the Project Aristotle, and their research into what makes an effective team. So they went down this path. They, did all kinds of research and A/B testing and all this kind of stuff. And then in 2016, they released research from within Google that validated academic research, which to me, academic research is great. And we got to see it in real life before it's really, something that we can trust. So they identified that 43% of overall performance is highly correlated with psychological safety. So it's the biggest single metric. So we were sitting there going, this is the thing. Like if we can move the needle on this one thing, we can make a huge difference for the lives of people. So work life improves and outcomes improve for business. We're like, why wouldn't businesses want to invest in a thing that improves all these things for people while improving their business. You get two birds with one stone, and so we really thought that was a benefit. And then from a personal side of things, much more about my personal story, but I went through a long journey of working with really challenging environments and really challenging people, and then keying in on sort of a more primal lifestyle. Waking up with the sun, going to bed to the sun. Seeing how human beings behave regardless of context. Or regardless of context, you put a person in it, they're going to behave a certain way. So thinking of these sort of primal ways that we operate as human beings is really connected to psychological safety. We're survivalists at heart, so we're going to do that. So understanding that primal nature, and then this connection to business, and then my own experience with a lot of leadership experience, and understanding how hard it can be to create high performing teams, really led to this being the answer that we felt was the most important one to address.
Yeah, and it really it got me thinking a lot, when we first touched this subject, what's the difference? A lot of people call their teams families, and they're not, right? Families are much different. They're tribes of people, as you said, primal tribes of individuals who help each other along and stay connected as a community. It's just an interesting topic as we dive into it, but I know a lot of people have come for AI. So before we dive down the regular psychological safety route, I'm finding right now, innovation, you get two choices. There's either a success or a failure. And on a team level, how are people dealing with that? There's so much forced innovation right now with AI.
Yeah.
How are they grappling with this, and what is it causing? It must be big distortions in your world right now.
I mean, the short answer is not well. So like you say, there's sort of, if you're trying anything new, you're doing anything new in your personal life, in your work life, in anything, there's two possible outcomes: success or failure. In the case of failure, we have a much better sense of what happens. People feel a sense of shame, they feel a sense of loss. There's all these sorts of emotions that come with that. And there is a clear process to deal with that. Learning from failure is something that is, relatively easy to teach. It's relatively easy to learn, and it's relatively easy to implement. And the question is, do people face it head on? The biggest problem that we have with that is we quite literally will have clients say to us, can we just call it anything other than failure?
Right?
No, the point is to face this head on. If you face it head on and just call failures what they are, they're near misses, they're mistakes, they're things didn't go the way you wanted them to go. Great. If you can get people to be okay with that, if you can get teams to be okay with that, they can address it from an arm's length perspective, not taking it personally. The biggest problem we see with it is that people look to blame. There's sort of a primal reason for that as well, but we do want to find the culprit. And that's the problem with failure in complex environments, failure when it comes to implementing things like AI solutions, is that we want to find a failure point so we can fix it. But problems are so complex, there's usually more than one failure point. So we need to be open to diverse perspectives to answer those problems. So that's sort of the failure side of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, even with my own team, I have some interesting thing and I wanted to critique it. I thought it would be, with so much AI going on, I would say, if we fail, guys, I look at it as an investment in innovation. I'm not looking at it as you failed, here's a mark on your dossier or whatever. I'm just saying, hey, it's just another investment we have going down this road of investments that we have, because it's so critical to fail fast, adjust, fail fast, adjust. And having a team realize that they're not scored on overall, how many little failures can you stack up. It's how close are we to bringing about this new innovation to the marketplace?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the narratives change that I would make there is away from fail fast and towards fail wisely. So you could literally create an award within the company for who had the most successful failure. And what makes it a success is the degree of learning that comes from it. Right. So it's this is great. You go out, make mistakes all day. That's great. If you're bringing back learning, that's benefiting everyone. And people learn more from the stories of others than their own mistakes. So if you're converting those stories of failure and mistakes inside an organization into stories that are communicated, this is what happened. This is how the leader presented it. This is what the team did. This is how they debriefed it. This is how they've changed as a result of it. Other teams are going to look at that and go, okay, we can do that too. It's a much easier way to manage failure and capitalize on it from both of an individual, team, and organizational level.
So it's really interesting. And we're going to dive into that because there's a lot of cultural nuance that I think exists over top of that, of being able to say, hey, let's move down that path. I think there's those teams of collaboration that you're kind of referring to, but then there's a lot of other ones that have divergence or there's not that level. Yeah. So how, and this is my next one, how do we deal with mass uncertainty that this innovation presents on a company level and a day-to-day level? And does it start from the bottom? Does it start from the top? Does it start as a cultural nuance? Like, where do you?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two answers to this. One is the sort of organizational level. Organizations need to be clear of what they're asking their leaders to do. And I think fundamentally, most organizations are asking too much of the wrong things from their leaders. Do you want them to manage or do you want them to lead? Do you want them to be doing what HR should be doing? A lot of stuff that I see leaders being asked to do is really like, that's an HR call. HR is going to make the call on that at the end of the day, but you just wasted weeks of your leader's time. Mm-hmm. So, for example, one of the biggest things I pick on is the annual performance review. Feedback should happen all the time. But the amount of leaders that I've met, the amount of team members that I know that get feedback on how they're doing once a year, that's more common than leaders who provide and team members who receive feedback daily. Feedback should be happening all the time. So the question is, what are leaders being asked to do? And are they being asked to do things that are productive from a leadership perspective? And if they do that, a lot of the other things that organizations want become easy or much faster to get done. So then the next answer is, what are leaders doing? Leaders are chronically undertrained. Leadership is a different skill. One friend of mine likes to say that it should be more synonymous with a trade and getting your trade than anything else. And I do agree with that. As a leader, to think that you're any good within 4 years is almost laughable. Like it is a 4 to 5 year journey to become capable as a leader 99% of the time. And if you want leaders to be good, you got to give them skills. So that's really, those are your two big lever points. And then, do teams come together? How do they come together and why do they come together? So we have a framing the work checklist that we give leaders where we get them to talk about purpose. Like, why is your team coming together? Uncertainty. What is uncertain? What is certain? Right. One of the biggest things is like, how are we going to operate when we receive new information? Right. So managing uncertainty starts with how you lead a team. Talking about interdependence. How do we collaborate? Talking about the role of the leader. A lot of missed opportunity in clarifying expectations of what a leader can and can't do or should and shouldn't do. Talk about failure. What would failure actually look like? What do we as a group believe is failure? And then what's at stake? So what happens if we blow this? And I think those 6 items are so critical and they're so simple and so easy, but they're just not out there. And leaders aren't trained to facilitate conversations around those. And it's a huge, huge missed opportunity for organizations and leaders to manage uncertainty, to manage implementation of new technologies like AI. And I think that's where most of the places we start with an organization is starting to give leaders these like really simple daily skills.
Yeah. And, with the amount of change that's going on, it is wild. It's something that we've never seen before. And even that vision, I think that where people are doing annual strategic meetings, they have to move. Like things are shifting by quarter. It's no longer like to have what I would call psychological safety amongst leadership or alignment, even, it has to be more often. As you said, annual doesn't cut it anymore.
No.
The speed of business is so much faster. And then our adjustments, we're trying to lead people through things that we have never seen. Have,
Yeah.
have, have we ever seen a robot that can do our work in 1 minute with what took months before?
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely wild. So let me ask you this. It's going to be on everybody's mind. So from the day to day to the top down, is where do we actually begin implementing psychological safeties to encourage the end result, which is the high performance team?
Yeah. So every single interaction is an improvement. There is an opportunity to improve, repair, or break psychological safety. So you actually need to be aware of it all the time as a leader. It never ends, right? Because it's an environmental thing that we're assessing all the time when we're in groups. So when teams have a common goal, the more common the goal, and I like to say you can almost map psychological safety relative to who has to share information with who to get their work done well, right? That's it. We call it interdependence, right? So you mentioned the word investment earlier. Psychological safety is all about investment, right? When you gamble, you throw money out there and hope you win. When you invest, you're much more informed, you're much more strategic, and you understand that the longer you play the game and the more you invest, the better the returns. Right. And psychological safety is like that. It's not something that you just say, oh, we're psychologically safe, and all of a sudden you're psychologically safe. It's not how it goes. People are going to watch how you treat other people. People are going to look for clarity in how to operate with each other. They're looking for these things all the time. So it's a daily investment in every interaction.
So the beginning is setting up the structure, and the biggest thing for me that I've seen, and I want you to dig in this, just a little bit of a primal example, a little my own therapy that Neil and I do sometimes, is like I found that the more structured I had with my overall vision and mission and values of my company, my cultural structures, the easier this got. Could you talk to those kind of foundational elements as part of this? So there's lines drawn, I believe, that people function within.
Yeah, so I think this is really interesting because one of the words that I've liked to pick on lately is alignment. And alignment is one of these great words that everybody can spout out the dictionary definition of. But most people use it in a different way, which is, so we're all aligned, right? Which means you're going to do what I told you to do. And that's usually how it's used. But if you do a really good job of vision, mission, values, for example, people have common understanding. And common understanding is alignment. Common agreement is not necessarily alignment. Common understanding is, right? We can agree or disagree and commit, for example, and still be aligned. So if you have really good vision and mission, people have a North Star, they know where we're trying to go together. But if you have really good values, they start to determine behavior. So, for example, in Aristotle performance, exponential impact is like our number one aim. And we will do math. We'll sit down with, we have a client right now that we want to do a research project with. And we're going, how many people can we positively impact in this? Okay, we're going to take a bit of a financial hit. We're going to make a little bit less money because we want the research to share with our community. We want to make sure that we have this opportunity. It's an ideal situation. It's going to be good for the client. It's going to be good for us. But most importantly, it's going to be good for everyone. So we're aligned on that because we have common understanding on what that means. So that common understanding helps us make decisions in the moment. So that list of 6 things that I gave a moment ago, if you have common understanding on those things, then you can use them to make better decisions. So people don't have to go to the group and think about it. It's like, I know how to behave. I know what matters to this group. I know how to operate with it. This tribe that I've chosen to be a part of is one that I know how to behave well in. And now they're using their minds to think about problem solving instead of survival.
Wow, that's profound. Problem solving instead of survival. And it's hard in a capital environment, and you can probably address this. Over the past 2 years, the cost of capital has went up 14 to 20x,
Mhm.
depending on what happens, from 0.25% interest to over 5%. And people are grappling with, okay, I got to be hyper effective. Money's not easy. Think I have to make more certain decisions.
Yeah.
How are you kind of grappling with that market shift, like internally, because it's really changed? Money's not cheap, and things aren't easy, and contracts aren't easy, and everybody's kind of coming to a new normal, almost, I would call it. So what are you seeing teams grapple with that, like from a management perspective right now?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we're noticing is, things like inflation make your employment that much more necessary.
Hmm.
If the power is in the hands of the employees, they'll speak up more. And if the power is in the hands of the employer, where people are more nervous about the job market, people will hide mistakes just because they don't want to get fired. I mean, and so they should. People will, keep their ideas to themselves, because if they share the idea and it gets implemented and it doesn't work, is their head on the chopping block? You know,
Mhm.
and that is it's a momentary decision. And the challenge that leaders face, like I mentioned before, is that silence is the default, and it's easy. It's always there, and it works.
Mhm.
It works for now, and we have this belief that a version of ourselves in the future would make maybe a more mature or a better decision. And the reality is that we don't. Jerry Seinfeld has a bit about this where he talks about drinking. You go out drinking at night and you go, oh, I'll have another drink, and people are you going to feel that in the morning? You go, well, that's tomorrow guy's problem, right? And we kind of operate like this all the time. So the answer is leaders need to double down on creating common understanding on how you want to be with each other. When people speak up, you have to reward it, and you can't reward it with cash. You must reward it with appreciation and acknowledgement. So I appreciate that you shared ABC. I think that led to whatever impact. You know, those little mini rewards, it's like a cue to the remainder of the team. This behavior is the behavior we want to see more of. So those little things, like corrective, I like to think of it like a bowling alley. Corrective feedback, you can do this a little better, you can do that a little better. Those are like bumpers on a bowling alley.
Mhm.
But appreciation and acknowledgement, catching people doing things right out of the side of your eye and then bringing it to the center and pointing it out to everyone. Those are the kinds of things that provide direction and momentum. And that's what knocks the pins down.
Good old Dale Carnegie rule: praise in public and chastise in private, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still true, because we as people have not fundamentally changed.
Hmm. Yeah, I like the fundamental rules when we go back to it. Now let's jump to a really big question on everyone's mind. So, how do we evolve with AI to remain in peak psychological safety to get that high performance?
Mhm.
What's the roadmap for the average team? Where do we start? Where do we check in each week? Where do we end?
Sure. So that list of 6 things that I gave earlier: purpose, uncertainty, interdependence, role of the leader, failure, what's at stake. Facilitating conversations, creating common understanding around that, help resolve what Google said in their study, which is psychological safety, 43%. And then you have these other things: dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and impact. Like, these 5 things are really what teams need to be able to function well. And what they do collectively is build on a foundation of psychological safety, which is critical. You must have it. But then you can't get anything done without accountability. And people want to be accountable to something, because we produce things, we want to be useful, we want to have value to the people around us, and we want to grow. And to grow, we must be challenged.
Mhm.
It's that simple. So psychological safety is not the end goal. It's the foundation on which we grow and produce things. And we refer to that, like, the technical term is called team learning.
Mhm.
from that, we get high performance.
Wow.
So to do that is the most critical thing. And then, so what teams need to be doing is learning effectively together. So that's taking in new information, creating understanding around it, and then implementing it. So they need to get really good at that.
And then raising, and so I hear you right, and it's also raising the frequency of those feedback loops.
Yes.
In this environment is the kind of difference it was before. So where people were acting annually or quarterly, we almost have to be acting weekly or daily in our loops now.
Yeah. So one of the things I really like this. We've just developed a workshop called The Art of Innovation, and in there we talk a lot about the work of Dr. Amy C. Edmondson, who is, sort of the seminal. She's really the main researcher when it comes to psych safety. Sort of, if you read anything about psych safety, you're going to find her name real quick. And her latest book is called The Right Kind of Wrong. And we extrapolated from that. And I think she has presented it in various spaces, something called the SMART risk checklist. So if you're taking smart risks that you can learn from, they are opportunity driven. It's a new territory, so you're not totally certain what's going to happen. Informed as best as possible by prior knowledge. And then I think this is the most important one. It's as small as possible, and you can still learn what you need to know. So the last piece is designing and having a plan to learn, but this piece is as small as possible is really critical when it comes to the size or the length of time for your feedback loop. So, for example, if you're trying a new process with your team, if you're very committed to it, chances are, and it's like a weekly process, if you want to get feedback on it after 2 weeks, it's not long enough. You need like 8 weeks. You need 8 cycles. If you're doing something once a week, you need to do it for at least 8 weeks. When we talk about behavior, you want to see new behaviors, you have to give it 6 to 8 months of consistent effort. So if you want feedback on, am I getting feedback on my behaviors at month 1? It's like, it doesn't work yet. So you have to match the feedback cycle to the problem you're trying to learn from. And that is one of the most critical things teams can do to improve their learning, is just match those up better. And if everybody has understanding on it, the game you're playing. Right? The game you're playing is learn and get better. Like you were talking about with your team, like, I don't just fail and learn. Like, that's good. And we're going to talk about it all the time, because you're in a faster cycle. Like, sales cycle is very fast. You can put in 100 inputs within a week, and you can know from the beginning of the week to the end of the week, you can have data on whether your changes worked.
It's really interesting. The two main things, and like, I've had a lot of people I repositioned in my company, right? Like, they're not right in this role, we're moving them over here. But the reason I do that and I reinvest in that person is there's a level of commitment that you feel there, that constant learning, the commitment to themselves, but commitment to the company, and a positive attitude with people. So when people interact with them, they're like, hey, it was a good interaction. I felt good about it. They're there to help. They're there to learn. Not everyone's going to be a rock star right away, but some of my best people have been those ones that I recommitted to jumping into new roles and redoing over time. And that kind of spirit has now proliferated everybody, like realizing, okay, like we're on this journey together. Like, how do we make the most of this, what we're doing for others? And so that's been an interesting thing that you helped me evolve, was like, okay, how do I think about things? And it's not just like a Jim Collins, are they on the right seat? Yeah. It's literally like, what are the values, what are the guidelines for them? And then how do we create where they aren't thinking, am I going to get fired? Am I doing the right thing? Where does my validity and accountability come from? And then speeding that frequency up is what you're saying. And so it's an interesting notation in a world of uncertainty. The real certainty comes from our relationships.
Yes, 100%. I think that's one of the things when I think about that, framing the work checklist, like how we set up our work with each other. Purpose is one of the first ones that teams never talk about. And it's like, oh, we have this high-minded idea, this altruistic vision of what we want to accomplish together. And I always say, no. It's like, why do you actually work together? Why does this team come together? What is this ritual of meeting? Why is it here? Does it help you solve problems together? So starting to think about things in a little bit different way can fundamentally shift your approach. So if you're reinvesting in people, for example, because you're like, hey, look, I see your commitment, and these are behaviors that we want. You're rewarding the behavior you want by putting them in a position where they might grow more. That's different from the one they're currently in. So you're rewarding the commitment. So other people go, oh, if I'm committed, that's how I fit in this space. That's how I work with this tribe, this camp, this community, whatever. And I think that's what leaders need to evolve into, thinking more about. What is rewarded? What is actually rewarded is what you'll see more of. So if you want to see more of something, reward it. But you gotta step back and give a little bit of a meta perspective. And this is something that we help organizations do. For example, we worked with one organization that had their bonus structure was that if you hit 100% of your goals that you created with your manager, you got 100% of your bonus. Which, I mean, it sounds good in theory, but people are adverse to risk, right? Growth is steady, but not what it could be, right? Because people are taking goals on that they know they can hit. They want 100%. So the golden number is actually 20%. There's some really interesting research that points to 20% of your time. Ideally, 20% of your time is challenging, frustrating, kind of, brutal. But that time isn't brutal because it's something lame or irritating. It's because you're being challenged in your role to grow. So that's where that corrective feedback, people are often like, oh, don't do this, don't do that. It's, this is what's here and this is how you could improve it, which is fundamentally different from you're doing something wrong. It's like, if you improve this, you're more of what we need to succeed. You're more of what your team needs to succeed. And people want to be involved in that kind of growth. It's good for their future. It's good for everything. So people know that sort of deep down, even if they can't articulate it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then I'm sure that, it's been interesting for everyone on LinkedIn listening here. And if you guys are on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you see this posted, I want to encourage you a couple things because I know we're coming to the end of our time. And that was pretty profound to line people up and just understand you start with a human. There's a level of commitment that needs to exist. Like, what are those positive attributes you need to line up? Psychological safety and increasing the frequencies. Those are the main things that I took from, and I know you have your checklist. So this is what I want to encourage people to do. First off, if you haven't added Neil on LinkedIn right now, add him, have a connection with him, have a conversation. Since I don't know if the LinkedIn questions were working as we're going through this, I know one popped up here and we'll address that right now, but I encourage you to reach out to Neil, follow Aristotle Performance, and really dive into this, because part of high performance teams, like what we deal with at revenue operations and sales all day, it comes down to people. It matters like you can have the perfect system and the perfect process, but if there's nobody there to power it, it never works. And the only way to get that powered up team is to address these things. And as a leader, I have a lot of blind spots and I got to go through as constant therapy to work these things out and become better at what I do. And it's that constant evolution. So Leo has a question here, Neil. He says, hey, the conversation we're having seems the same setup as we've had for a while. How does this approach for psychological safety now search with AI emerging? And as I guess that's what we went over. We talked about frequency, which has to happen way more often. It has to be good feedback loops that exist. And then you have to have foundational guidelines that really guide people through. Is there anything else that you'd add to Leo's question there before we jump off, Neil? And then if you want people to follow you anywhere else, let us know.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. LinkedIn is the place. And I think, Leo, I appreciate your question in part because it helps close the loop on something I said earlier, which is when we are trying anything new, there's two possible paths. Failure, which we've talked about, taking smart risks, learning from failure, those kinds of things are super critical with the feedback loops. But the other one is success. If we are successful in adopting something new, we have to change. People don't like change. They don't want to change. People want things to be as they are. So as a leader, we need to do a better job of preparing people for inevitable change. Change is normal. So one of the ways that leaders can do that to prepare teams is literally choosing things to keep changing all the time. So for example, a friend of mine who's also in sales, actually a sales VP, came to me and he's like, I need to get my team innovating more. And I just can't. And I said, well, we started talking about it. And ultimately what it came down to is they found a formula that worked and they were all in on it and they were doing great. But they had not allocated any time or space or resources to trying different things that would do one of two things: validate what their current process or identify new processes. So baking into your team, into your strategy, into your work processes, a space where you're gonna just try new things flexes that muscle. And you want to have good, strong muscles for trying new things, taking it on and implementing it, so that as AI continues to emerge, teams are ready. And one of the things I'll add about this is most people associate learning with school. And if you know me personally, I'm like a voracious learner. I love to have my mind blown. It is my favorite thing. That's uncommon, turns out. Most people don't want that. So you have to train people to learn in a context that isn't school, that's much more interesting in most cases, and is actually beneficial to the team. So hopefully that answers your question and drives a little bit more of the conversation too.
So the final one is, hey, we want to encourage people to connect with you and go through your process, because addressing psychological safety is the thing that's going to have to happen in a massive change environment. You want to avoid massive turnover, but the only way to do that is to have high performing teams where people are accountable, involved, and continuously learning. So reach out to Neil, guys. Is there anywhere else they can reach you, or is LinkedIn all good?
LinkedIn's great. The website, aristotleperformance.com. We always respond to people that are coming through there as well.
Awesome. That's great. And just a thanks for the answer. I'll connect with you, he says. So yeah, I encourage you guys to connect. Again, like, follow, share, do all those good things. We're bringing this Bot to Not series and amazing people like Neil who are changing everything for dynamic companies. And just, you work for everything from huge US multinationals across the board. So if you guys want to check this out, Neil's work from the individual smaller company, but he does so many large enterprises and governments and everything like this. So if you want to dig in, this is your guy across the board, no matter the size of your company. He's here for you, and he's been a great friend to me for over the years. So I encourage you guys to reach out, and thanks so much. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching, and keep removing those revenue roadblocks. If you want more videos like this, follow our channel for fresh, new content every day. Check out our RevOps playlist, or how about this video chosen just for you? See you next time.